Hello, hi, welcome in and welcome back. My name is Dustin. This is a podcast called Boy Meets Therapy, and this podcast is blending clinical research with real conversations about vulnerability, relationships, friendship, identity, and culture with an emphasis on the LGBTQ plus community. Episodes feature solo insights like this one is going to be, and in-depth interviews with licensed professionals who share both their expertise and their humanity with us so generously. I almost said generally, but well, I guess they do that too, but generously. So I wanted to jump on here and talk about something that I see a lot about. I've noticed a pattern actually um, of thinking, and this is not just like LGBTQ plus queer people, whatever. This is a lot of people in general, but I notice it especially with my like queer like peeps, people, whatever. And that is reinvention. That is the idea that if I change or alter this thing or these things about myself, then things are going to be different. And I see a lot of people say they want reinvention. And sometimes it doesn't look like, when we hear reinvention, we think of like a full reinvention as like I'm going to go wherever and then I'm going to come out and be a completely different person or something like that. Sometimes it's little things. So a lot of things that I see in common are people that talk about I want to move to a new city, like I'm going to go to this new place and start my life over here, or new body. That's a big one. Oh, I'm going to go to the gym and work out really hard. And then by summertime or whatever, I'm going to be like super ripped and shredded and blah, blah, blah. And then, things will be X, Y, and Z different. Career, social circles, just a new version of ourselves, something that is changed in some way. I don't want to say updated, but I want to say something that has changed in some way. And on the surface, I think that reinvention pretty often gets marketed as confidence, as empowerment, as finally becoming who you are meant to be. And that's a big thing that I think a lot of, I'm thinking about like health brands, they do this a lot. I'm thinking about gyms or fitness brands. They do this a lot. Travel companies, like there's a lot of this idea of changing ourselves in a way that makes us feel better or makes us become better versions of ourselves, blah, 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 blah. But I think it's interesting because clinically, when someone tells me they want to reinvent themselves, sometimes I am listening for something that's a little different. So sometimes I'm listening to them tell me what broke or what needs to be changed or what stalled. What never got to develop in the first place, maybe that's something. I want to talk about what reinvention actually is psychologically, why it shows up so often for LGBTQ people, and really how to tell the difference between reinvention that leads to growth or like a positive change and reinvention that quietly becomes another form of self-abandonment. And I know that's a big like intense clinical term of like abandonment, but like bear with me for a little bit, okay? Because I think sometimes we have this idea that starting over is automatically like a refresh, beginning, clean slate, whatever. There are a lot of these words that come along with starting over and like fresh, clean, like things like that. And sometimes it could be avoidance that is a little bit better dressed. Sometimes it could be from a good place. I'm not knocking anyone who says I want to do something different or be different. Like that's obviously not what I'm here to fucking do. But I do want to acknowledge just like kind of what happens here and what it is, where it comes from, all these fun things. So I thought that would be really cool because it's something I've heard a lot recently because it is February and a lot of people are talking about, summer's coming up. So I want to prepare, or people are saying, I want to, you get what I'm saying. Okay. I'm doing that thing where I fucking over explain. And I just want to tell myself, Dustin, you're all right. Have y'all ever, this is a side note, have you ever had a Southern woman just like look at you and say, you're all right. You're all right. Have you ever had that happen? Because I have. And it's really remarkable. It's really like if you ever think you're going in the wrong direction, just channel a Southern woman looking at you and saying, "Hey honey, come here, baby. Baby, you're all right. You're going to be all right." And I feel like I feel like everything will then be all right. Okay. We need to move on along. Get back to my script. So reinvention almost never comes from nowhere. Okay. It usually comes after maybe some kind of relational rupture, a move, some kind of rejection. Even if it's a minimal rejection, it doesn't have to necessarily be a huge rejection. Of course, that could be it as well. A loss, maybe burnout, or maybe finally entering a safer social environment. That could be one too, where you're like, oh, I'm in this new environment. I feel like I have an opportunity here to really tap into like who I am, all the deeper things and stuff like that. So it comes after an identity that we have typically no longer works. And that is where psychology becomes more useful than I think some of the motivation language. So I really love psychology in general. I did my undergrad, I did my bachelor's degree in psychology, and I really, really enjoyed it. And what's interesting about doing psychology, like as a degree or studying it formally, is just the excitement that everybody else in the room has. Of course, there's like a couple people in your class that will be like, I don't care, whatever. But I think most people in those classes really have discussions that are happening. They are really interactive. Like there's always the one kid in the class who really has a lot to say, who's sometimes going to be like fucking annoying. But, there's always this intense dialogue that comes up when we talk about like psychology topics. And that's one of the coolest things about studying it, or when you go to college, or if you did do it in college or whatever, is kind of really like having these discussions and sharing our own opinions on some of this stuff. So I want to go into some of the psychology of it because I feel like it can be a lot more helpful than someone being like, believe in yourself, you know, like, like you got this, it's like, well, okay, what if I don't have this? And what if anyway, so all right, but I'm gonna like pay attention to my script this time. Like I'm really gonna try to do that because my brain is like, what's over here? What's over there? So let me like, I'm gonna lock in, okay? We're fucking locked in. Let's fucking go. Okay, so what does psychology actually mean by identity change? What does that mean? So let's go back to like the roots. So in developmental psychology, which I wasn't a huge fan of, I have to say, like it's not my favorite, but it's obviously really important. But in developmental psychology, identity is not something that you simply decide. So identity is typically something that forms through repeated social roles, feedback, belonging, and emotional learning. This work is most closely associated with Erik Erikson. So if you do not have a psychology degree and you do not know who this is, Erik Erikson's theory really emphasized that identity development is shaped by how safely we can experiment with roles and relationships over time. Erikson also has these like stages of development that he talks about that we move through. As many like of the founding kind of like psychologists or psychiatrists and our mental health people, because they weren't always called psychologists. A lot of times it was psychiatrists or physicians or so there are a lot of different theories, but kind of his, and I want to shout out something. So there's a book that I really, really love. It is over here. Hold on, what is it called? I know what it's called, obviously. It's called Out of the Shadows. I recommend it all the time. It's recommended like on my website too. It's called Out of the Shadows. It's by Walt Odets. This one is specifically kind of for gay men. It's really like Walt Odets is a clinical psychologist who worked in New York and San Francisco, and he wrote this book. And basically, he goes by Erik Erikson's stages of development, but he kind of tweaks them for gay men. And it's really, really incredible book. It's kind of like The Velvet Rage is always like a good book when you really want to get into like gay psychology, like the psychology of gay men. And if you're not a gay man and you're just queer, then like this is just a little side note. But Odets, who is the author of this book of Out of the Shadows, really goes deep. He goes really, really deep in kind of like his theory and all that stuff. So it's really, really interesting to read. I definitely recommend reading that. Before I went to grad school, I actually met with the author I like emailed him and was like, hey, I really loved your book. Would you talk with me or whatever? Like I'm looking at grad schools. And he actually like got on a call with me and it was really, really cool. So I recommend that if you have an author or somebody that you like or whatever, reach out to them because I think a lot of times you'll be surprised that they will be responsive to you. I try to be, so please give me credit where credit is due, but I also, people, we got shit going on, okay? All right, back to this. So yeah, so this work is most closely associated with Erik Erikson. And there's a very important clinical point here. And identity is not built in isolation. Identity is built in response to other people. You learn who you are by being mirrored accepted, rejected, challenged, and emotionally seen. So we're constantly learning things with, if I do this, are people accepting of that? If I do that, do people like that? If I say something funny, like, am I funny? If I say something funny, is it going to resolve this situation? We're constantly learning these things like as we're developing. And when people reinvent themselves later in adulthood, it is rarely because they're unstable. More often, it's because parts of identity development were delayed, constrained, or interrupted. For a lot, this isn't always true, but sometimes it is. For a lot of queer people, adolescence and early adulthood were not psychologically neutral environments. So, psychologically neutral, that sounds like a kind of intimidating term, right? Like, we don't want to go in there. These are highly monitored environments. And these environments, you're learning how to stay safe, or stay quiet, or stay likable, or stay undetectable, or stay legible to others in very, very narrow ways. We're kind of like really, really on guard when it comes to like developing. So, some of these things that we're really into, or things that we really like, or behaviors or mannerisms that we have, kind of sometimes have to be curtailed or curbed or changed because maybe they're not acceptable. So we kind of put it away. So when reinvention shows up later in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, whatever, it is often delayed identity work, not really a dysfunction. So I looked at this because this is really, really cool. The 3 psychological motives behind reinvention. So clinically, reinvention is usually driven by one of these 3 underlying motives. This is not consciously, okay? This is psychologically. So we're talking about motivations that we have. So one of the motives here is competence repair. What is competence repair? This sounds like, I need to finally feel capable. I need to finally feel impressive. I need to finally feel respected. This aligns very closely with self-determination theory. So self-determination theory, if you are a psych major or whatever, you probably heard of this. Self-determination theory was developed by Edward Deci and Richard Ryan. Their research shows that humans have 3 core psychological needs. Okay. This is what they kind of found. And these needs are competence, autonomy, and relatedness. So competence is not necessarily about being the best. It's about feeling effective in the world. So when competence development was blocked earlier in life, people often attempt to repair it later through reinvention. And this is one of the motives. If you don't identify with this one, stick to the next one because you might identify with that one. For many queer people, competence repair shows up as hyper investment in career, extreme body transformation projects, becoming exceptionally skilled at presentation, or becoming emotionally high functioning in ways that keep you valuable to others. The underlying emotional logic here is really simple. It is, if I become impressive enough, I will finally feel safe in my place. Competence-driven reinvention is not inherently unhealthy. Like, I don't want you to think that this is an inherent thing that is unhealthy. It becomes a bit of a problem when competence becomes the only stable source of self-worth. So when we look at things like, hyper investment in career, that belief is, if I am not effective in my career, then I'm not effective in anything. Like extreme body transformation, like I mentioned, if I don't successfully transform or maintain my body in a certain way, then there's something lacking there. So some of these motives that we're looking at, it's important to just kind of like pay attention to them and where they're coming from. And if it is the only stable source of self-worth that you have, right? Like, if I lose my job, I am invaluable then as a person. So this sounds kind of extreme. So maybe don't take it to an extreme. If this is showing up in your life, maybe think about how it's showing up. I know for me, it shows up in like career stuff for sure. It's like, if sometimes I have friends call me or talk to me about like a problem they're having, and I feel like, oh my God, I have to give them the perfect answer. And if I don't, they're going to think that I'm like a fucking fraud or something, So it's like, that's like a little example, but it's situations like that where it's like, hold on, like, you have self-worth in other places, but this is kind of fixation that sometimes happens. So, okay, motive 2, belonging repair. So this sounds like, I finally fit. or I want to finally be wanted. I want to finally be one of them. That's a big one. Even if we're not saying in that way, sometimes that's what we're doing. This is the reinvention most people recognize. Okay. This is the one that is, I'm going to have a new aesthetic. I'm going to change, my clothes, the way I dress, my hair, whatever. I'm going to hang out with a new crowd. I'm going to have a new tone to my personality. I'm going to have a new social language. Belonging-based reinvention is usually a response to chronic social threat. Not a dramatic rejection, but kind of ongoing subtle exclusion. This looks like not being chosen, not being mirrored, not being prioritized, not being protected emotionally in groups. And for queer people, this often becomes especially intense after entering new social ecosystems. What does this look like? What we talked about earlier: new cities, new places, new queer communities, new dating pools, new political and cultural climates. In these situations, you are not just reinventing yourself, you are scanning for which version of you is least likely to be rejected. Belonging-driven reinvention quietly increases our self-monitoring, our comparison to other people, our social performance, and it reduces our behavioral range. I can't talk today. You do fewer things that might risk disapproval, and you become more strategically acceptable. Again, I want to say this again. If you're, I'm speaking kind of in extremes here. Okay. So I'm not here to tell you that this is an extreme that's happening and I have the solution and you have to keep listening to this episode for me to give you the solution. Like I'm not trying to sell you that. Just listen to because as I'm reading this back after I wrote it, I'm like, okay, some of this sounds kind of extreme, but if you relate to it, take it with you. And if you don't, then leave it here. So motive 3. Autonomy recovery. And all this stuff goes back to these 3 things that we talked about before, right? Like self-determination theory, that is competence, autonomy, and relatedness. Like all this is relating back to that. So yeah, autonomy recovery. So what does this look like? This sounds like I finally want to live as myself. I'm tired of managing who I am for other people. I want my choices to come from me. This is typically the healthiest reinvention driver, okay? It is also the least dramatic. Autonomy-driven reinvention usually expands life rather than narrowing it. You try new things. You tolerate more emotional exposure. You allow more ambivalence. You stop organizing your identity primarily around approval. But clinically, autonomy recovery often gets mixed together with belonging repair. People say that they want authenticity while secretly hoping it will finally secure safety and acceptance. And those are 2 very different emotional goals, okay? Those are 2 different things. So what is growth versus avoidance reinvention? Also, I want to acknowledge something. I'm pretty sure you got this, but just to like kind of cover this, I should have said this first. Competence, autonomy, and relatedness in self-determination theory, like what does that mean? Competence is feeling competent in what you do. You feel like people have like a respect and understanding that you know what you're doing, or that you have that. Autonomy, making your own decisions. And relatedness is just the way that you relate and whether or not you feel related to other people. I should have said that at the beginning, but I feel like you know that. But I just want to throw that in there. So growth versus avoidance reinvention. What do we want to do? Like we want to avoid avoidance. We want to avoid avoidance. Okay. That's a fucking brain teaser. So not all reinvention is growth, okay? Some reinvention is emotional bypassing. So here's a clean way to listen to your own motives, okay? When you're like listening to yourself or whatever. And I definitely encourage people to have conversations with themselves. I know that doesn't work for everybody, but it really works for me. And it's worked for a lot of people that like a lot of my friends, like but a lot of people that I know do this and they just have full on conversations with themselves, which is okay. Just, just put your headphones in. This is what I do. Like I'll put my headphones in and pretend I'm on the phone and I'll have a full on conversation with myself. I know that sounds a little kooky, but no one fucking knows except I just told you. You wouldn't have known otherwise. But yeah, some reinvention is emotional bypassing. So this is a clean way to listen to your own motives. So growth-driven reinvention typically feels slower. It increases emotional flexibility. It allows relationships to feel safer, not more strategic. Like who do I feel comfortable with? Not do I need to hang out with this person because of X, Y, and Z. Um, it tolerates being seen before being approved of. Avoidance-driven reinvention typically. Oh my god, I think I spit on the microphone. Avoidance-driven reinvention typically feels really urgent. It depends heavily on external validation. It creates a new identity role that is just as rigid as the old one. I have to do this. I have to be this person. I have to, X, Y, and Z. I have to do that. That is rigidity. One of your clearest clinical signs of avoidance-driven reinvention is like really intense rigidity. Your self-worth and this state can become fragile again very quickly. And this is not because you're failing. It's just because the new identity is still trying to regulate old shame. Reinvention becomes maladaptive when it replaces grief, anger, or unresolved social injury. You cannot out-aesthetic unprocessed rejection, okay? You cannot outperform ungrieved loss. And I feel like I want to explain those more, but I actually think I'm not going to. I want you to think about what that means for you instead of me kind of translating it. Because I try to translate all this mental health language, but I feel like that can be kind of intentionally vague. So what is the queer specific layer that most conversations miss? And I really go deeply into like queer men, but we're going to go pretty broad for this one in the queer space. So this is where reinvention becomes especially complicated for LGBTQ people. Okay. So many queer people did not get to practice dating and attraction in public and socially supported ways. They did not get to practice identity experimentation without social or family consequences. That means, acting like yourself or doing something different without someone having some, what are you wearing or what are you doing or blah, 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 some kind of response towards your behavior. Emotionally safe trial and error with peers who shared their experience. So that a lot of times is where a lot of us feel isolated, is that we're kind of in this protective mode where it's like, I'm not going to talk about, things I want to do because there could be risk of social rejection that could come along with that. So for a lot of queer people, early development involved some version of monitoring how visible you were, deciding which parts of yourself were safe to show, or learning to split your identity across different social environments. That's essentially like compartmentalizing different aspects of our personality. School, family, religion, work, and friendships often required different versions of you. And that matters psychologically. And this is a little bit different than, I know sometimes we talk about code switching, which is like a thing that I think pretty naturally happens with a lot of people. And we also can have different personalities, right? Like the way that people, my friends in corporate jobs, act when they're at work is going to be really different than when they're with me, like twerking and throwing ass on a Friday and Saturday night. Like obviously we're going to be very different in the way that we act in those different environments. With the same way when I go home and I'm around my parents or whatever, the conversations look different. I'm not necessarily talking about that. I'm talking about when you really have to create a different version of yourself that is serving a purpose that is really protective. Because identity development depends on being able to try on roles and relational styles without constantly scanning for danger. So a lot of times, straight and cisgender adolescents, they really get to try this repeated practice with things like crushes, rejection, awkward first relationships, public experimentation with appearance and identity, and relational repair after social mistakes. Many queer people do not get equivalent practice in the same developmental window. So later in life, reinvention often carries an unspoken fantasy. If I finally become the right version of myself, belonging will stop hurting. That fantasy shows up across identities. For some people, it is about being more attractive. For some people, it is about being more socially fluent or more socially adept. For some, it is about being more politically legible, more masculine or feminine, more successful, more confident, or more put together. But psychologically, the goal here is the same, and that is to reduce our social vulnerability, to stop having to wonder whether rejection is about you your identity, or the environment that you are in. The risk is that reinvention quietly becomes a way of placing full responsibility for social safety onto the self. Instead of recognizing that many queer people grew up in environments that were not designed to support their identity development in the first place, a lot of times you end up blaming your personality, your body, or your self expression for social systems and group norms that were never really emotionally safe for you. This is one of the reasons why reinvention can feel so empowering at first and can slowly become really exhausting later, because you are trying to solve a relational problem with individual self optimization. So, what does that mean? Like, I'm trying to solve an issue with the way that I am relating through the optimization of myself, through making myself the best version that I think that it could be for whatever circumstance. So how does reinvention become another performance, right? Like, if the goal is authenticity and we are reinventing or doing something to be a more authentic version of ourselves, it feels like the main thing that we should be combating against in this situation is it becoming another performance of self, of who we are. So when reinvention becomes primarily belonging driven, something subtle happens. Your nervous system does not relax. It stays alert. You monitor tone. You monitor your desirability. You monitor your likability. You monitor relevance. And the new self-expression becomes a job, not expression at all, actually. And many queer people are already skilled at emotional labor. So doing this is just, you are just transforming one resource of energy that you have that was, maybe, this is the quick example I'm going to use, it could be anything, ensuring that I appear more masculine or straight passing. And I am moving from that, and I'm utilizing that energy that was exhausting me to do that. I am now using the same energy to exhaust me to make sure that I am being well liked in a certain situation, or that I'm being well desired or something in a certain situation. So we're really just rearranging the resources, and we're essentially just performing again. And that is going to exhaust us yet again. Reinvention, when it becomes another performance, it is not a release or really an effective change. You've really just allocated resources that you were using to a different place. So what are some like reflective exercises that we can do? Like, especially if we're wanting to go through a phase of reinvention, or we feel like we are reinventing in some way, or I don't know, take reinvention however you want to take it. I want to give you like a really short reflection. And you could pause this episode here if you want to ask yourself 3 questions. And I really liked this because I did this before I started recording, and I was like, ooh, is that deep? I think it's deep. We might get a little deep. So you can pause if you want to like really think about this. Okay. First, what version of myself am I trying to leave behind? Okay. Not what trait, not what, certain specific thing. What version of me am I trying to leave behind? What emotional position? Second, what emotional state do I believe the new version of me will finally feel? Is that safer? Is that chosen? Is that respected, relaxed, less ashamed? Third, what emotional need is that new version actually serving? Is it competence? Is it belonging? Is it autonomy? You don't need to judge your answer. My goal is not to have you be like, oh, well, this isn't a fucking test. Just think about it. You do not need to, to really go too deep into what you're thinking. And even if what you're thinking sounds vain or superficial, I think one of the things that was coming up that I feel like I've heard is like the body thing, right? Like if I get the 6-pack, what emotional state what emotional state do I believe the new version of me will finally feel if I have that? Is that safety? Is that being chosen? What emotional need is that actually serving from me? Is that belonging? Will I feel belonging if I obtain that goal? Even if it sounds superficial or something, just think about what your motives are. Nobody's around you. Just do it in private. It's like you don't have to tell anyone. I sound like I'm criticizing you. I'm not trying to criticize you. I'm just wanting you to be honest with yourself because I feel like sometimes when I initially did this, I feel like I was a little dishonest with myself. Like I feel like I was like, no, 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 no. Like I don't want this. And it's like, no, 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 but you do want that because that's what came up for you. So like, where is that coming from? If it's something superficial or vain, or if it's like, I want to be more successful at work, I want to make more money. If that's what's coming up for you when you're talking about like reinvention, like get curious about it because something's there. What would it mean if I made more money? It doesn't always have to be like terrible or negative. Anyway, my goal is to encourage you to not like throw away those thoughts because my first thing would be like, if I were saying I wanted to be more like successful at work, right? I might think like, no, 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 that's vain. I want to do something deeper. But it's like, no, 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 that's what you thought of. So let's do this same exercise, but with that. Um, I hope that made sense. I hope that made sense. So how do we support a healthier reinvention? And I'm not telling you that your reinvention is not healthy. I just want your reinvention to be the healthiest that it can be. So if reinvention is a part of your life right now, here are some more questions, some clinically useful questions. These aren't like motivational questions. I'm not trying to like motivate you. I'm just asking you like regulatory. So like one, does this change increase my emotional range or does it shrink it? What is this going to do to my range of emotions and what I feel? Two, does this change make relationships feel safer or, to be honest, inside? Like how is this going to change my relationships, how they feel? Or does it make them more fragile? Like, is this change going to make my relationships more dependent on something? Three, if no one noticed this change, no one in the world, would it still matter to me? If nobody noticed what was going on or this reinvention or change that I had done, would this still matter to me? And this one is really good for like some of the superficial stuff. It's like for me, like I recently have like wanted to do new stuff with clothes. Like I've wanted to, spring is hopefully coming. So I've been thinking about like, what do I want to, isn't that a Lady Gaga song? What do you want to wear this spring? What do you think is the new thing? Donatella. That's Lady Gaga. If you don't know that, go listen to Donatella by Lady Gaga on Art Pop and you will know. But yeah, it's kind of like, what do I want to wear this spring? It's like, initially it can sound kind of superficial, but when I really think about like, if no one noticed, this outfit changed or whatever, would it still matter to me? I think it would. Like, I think I would feel comfortable in this, or I want to feel like I look cute in something, like that's okay. So these questions can be really extremely clarifying. I want to also say, if the answer to that question is, if no one noticed the new clothes that I got on or the new outfits that I bought, then it wouldn't matter. Then I would ask you, where does this motivation really come from? And is it belonging that you're wanting with this? Like, is it like, well, what's going on with this here? So I threw a lot of information at you. This is a quick like reframe. So reinvention, again, it's not supposed to erase earlier versions of yourself. Okay. Like I really struggle with that a lot because I did not really like being a kid. I hear a lot of people talk about, I want to go back to childhood and things were so carefree, blah, blah, blah. I didn't like that. I feel like I get a lot of like pushback when I hear people, when I say that to people and they're like, what do you mean? Things were so carefree. And it's like, no, like I really didn't like that growth period. I guess like the actual literal growth period. I really enjoy being an adult. I really enjoy autonomy. I really enjoy things like that. And so, that comes up for me when I'm thinking about, erasing an earlier version of myself. But I have to remind myself, it's not about erasing that version. It's about just like recognizing that and then choosing what to do with the information that you have around it. I hope that made sense. Yeah, it's supposed to integrate what you were not allowed to become yet. So not erasure, integration. If your reinvention is helping you tolerate more emotional exposure, more relational honesty, and more self-directed choice, it's likely growth. It might be growth. You might be growing. That's what it might be. If your reinvention is helping you disappear from discomfort faster, it is probably protection. And protection is understandable, but it does not do the same thing as the reinvention that you're thinking of. You do not need to become someone else to deserve safer relationships. Sometimes what actually heals you is letting your identity stop working so hard. So we talked about like a couple of things of reinvention, what it is, a couple of theories, just a few theories. If you want more about self-determination theory, I would just Google it. It's like really simple. But yeah, that's really also important in positive psychology. Positive psychology is the study of like positive emotions and what makes us feel happy and complete. And self-determination theory is a really important one there. I actually think that I learned about that in my positive psychology class, which I loved. Dr. Cohen, I loved you. You were my favorite. She wrote one of my letters of recommendation for grad school. I loved her. Yeah. Anyway, so I just want to ask you what your reinvention is reinventing. You know, if it's about I want to work out because I want to feel really confident in the summer and blah 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 blah, go for it. If your motivation is I want to work out because I want people to love me, that is a little deeper. Obviously, we can't do therapy here, but that's something that's a little deeper than that. Again, I'm not here to tell you that any of your motivations are wrong or that what you want is wrong. That's not what we're saying here. We're just asking why are they here? And if this is something that I want to do, what am I doing it for? And if nobody else noticed that I did this, would I still want to do it? I would just ask yourself some of those things. Yeah, so that was it. That was a little quick, like little 30 minutes. Like we're in, we're out, we love it. This episode's coming out on President's Day. I don't really know what that means. Actually, let me look it up. Okay, not fucking what day it is. I literally Googled President's Day. It said February 16th. Yeah, I fucking know. I know what day it is. What is it? I feel like a fucking idiot. Tell me what it means. Oh my God. What is President's Day? We're going to learn this together. Okay, it's a federal holiday officially designated as Washington's birthday to honor the first U.S. president, George Washington. Okay. It has also evolved to recognize Abraham Lincoln's February 12th birthday and celebrate all U.S. presidents. Okay, well. Happy President's Day, y'all. Okay, take with that what you will, take what you need, leave the rest. I'm glad you're here. I have to say this. I don't like saying it, but I have to say it. If you could please leave us like a 5-star review or a comment or a follow or a subscribe or whatever it is, wherever you are, I'd really appreciate it. Share this stuff if you found something insightful. Share it with a friend, whatever. I have to say those things because the society that we live in demands that I do. Anyway, with that, I'm going to bid you adieu. And if you're very cold, please hang in there. We're almost to spring. We're almost there. We're almost to spring. Hang in there. You can do this. I'm mainly talking to myself. Okay, bye.